Hey up and welcome back to the Rate Scary podcast. My name is Scary Zara Mary and we are delving into another film from the torture porn subgenre. So if you are new here, what I do on this podcast is I dip a toe into each subgenre of horror by going through a number of films that I have a particular love for within that subgenre. And at the moment we are going through torture porn. And today I am going through one of my very, very favourite torture porn films, and that is American Mary. I even have an American Mary t-shirt on today. This is from Unusual Horror Store. If you are not familiar with them, please do go follow them. I will tag them on my socials because they are absolutely fantastic. And I am especially excited to talk about this film because in May, there is a horror convention in the UK and it is called HorrorCon. It's in Sheffield, so it's not too far from where I live, so it's in Yorkshire. And the directors of American Mary, the Soska twins, Jen and Sylvia Soska, are attending as guests, and I am really, really hoping to be able to meet them. So I'm especially excited to be able to record this episode today, having that just being announced. But anyway, we will get into the Soska twins and talk about them. But first of all, let's go through the actual story of American Mary.
I'm changing specialties, Dr. Grant. Have you ever heard of body modification?
So in this film, we follow a surgical student called Mary who is absolutely desperate for funds, and she applies to work at a strip club. Billy Barker, the club's owner, is in need of a medical professional to patch up a man who is bleeding in his club's basement, the obvious victim of illegal dealings, and he offers Mary $5,000 to perform emergency surgery. Mary reluctantly accepts the money, but she spends the next few days absolutely terrified that the criminal activity that she's just gotten involved in is going to follow her home. Later, Mary is approached by a woman called Beatrice Johnson. She is a stripper at the club and she has had extreme plastic surgery to make herself resemble Betty Boop. She offers Mary a large sum of money to perform illegal surgery on her friend, Ruby Real Girl, in a veterinary clinic. Ruby wants to be transformed into a human doll, and she's been unable to find a surgeon who is actually willing to complete the last step of her transformation, which involves removing her nipples, all of her external genitalia, and also partly suturing her vulva shut. Mary questions this, she's not sure about it, but ultimately she accepts and she performs the surgery. And Ruby posts on her blog about the work that Mary has done and introduces Mary to the world of extreme body modification. Now, in the meantime, Mary has begun her residency in the surgical specialty, and her teachers and mentors are praising promising skills that she has. She's invited by a doctor named Dr. Walsh to what she believes is a networking party with several of the head surgeons at her hospital. However, she finds that she was the only young resident who was invited. The surgeons commit lewd acts on the others who are in attendance, who are all escorts, and at the party, Mary is drugged and raped by her former teacher, Dr. Alan Grant, who films the act as well. Due to this, Mary later drops out of her residency and she hires Billy Barker and his enforcers to kidnap Dr. Grant and deliver him to her apartment. There, she holds him hostage and uses him as practice material for her extreme surgeries. She then uses pictures of Dr. Grant for her portfolio, and Mary decides to go into body modification surgery full time. Word very quickly spreads through the dark web channels that Bloody Mary is a surgeon of great skill, willing to perform any extreme surgery desired. And that is exactly what happens. Mary is later questioned about Dr. Grant's disappearance by a police detective called Dolor, explaining that her name was on a list that Dr. Walsh gave him of women who might bear a grudge against Dr. Grant. Now, Billy has become very attached to Mary in the meantime, and he kidnaps and beats Dr. Walsh on her behalf. While torturing Dr. Grant, Mary is discovered and attacked by a security guard who attempts to free him, but Mary bludgeons him to death. Detective Dolor confronts Mary again, believing that she was a victim of one of the sex parties hosted by the two missing doctors, and hopes to help her. Unfortunately, in the meantime, Mary's grandmother passes away, and this causes her mental state to deteriorate further. And then she finds Billy receiving fellatio from one of the strippers at the club, and jealously, she attacks the girl with surgical tools in the bathroom of the club. Due to the police interest in Mary, she starts to worry that the tape of her rape will be found. And meanwhile, Ruby's husband, vengeful after seeing what has happened to his wife with her new bodily modification, tortures Beatrice to near death to find out Mary's location before he ambushes Mary at her house with a knife. Mary attempts to suture her own wound, but ultimately she bleeds to death in her operating room to be discovered by the police. So let's get stuck into some of the cast first of all. Obviously, I'm going to start with Mary Mason, our medical school student, aspiring surgeon, played by Catherine Isabelle. Now, you may know Catherine Isabelle from films like Ginger Snaps and one of my personal favourite films, Insomnia. I think she's a fantastic actress. I would love to see her specifically in more horror films, especially after seeing her in Ginger Snaps and in American Mary. And actually, the character of Mary was written with Catherine Isabelle in mind because her and the Soska sisters met as extras in the film Josie and the Pussycats in 2001. And so the Soskas loved her so much that they decided to write this character for Catherine Isabelle. And I think she's perfect in it. I'll come on to some of the stuff that we see, especially regarding her story arc, but I just love her. I relate to her so much. Like I said in my very first episode that I wasn't really going to delve into any films that cover the topic of rape specifically, unless there was a real need for a rape scene to be included in a film. And this is one of those films where the character of Mary is written with women in mind. This is written by women, directed by women, and it focuses entirely on Mary's story. It doesn't sexualize her rape in any sort of way. And actually, we see what happens to Mary in terms of what initially seems like her success, but actually is her demise as a person. So yeah, I love Catherine Isabelle. I think she is beautiful. I think she plays the role of Mary Mason wonderfully. I think she almost comes across as quite sinister in moments, especially in that scene where she decides to attack the girl in the bathroom. She is completely unhinged, but in a really, really quiet way, which I think is even more unnerving. So, big fan of Catherine Isabelle. We then have Antonio Cupo, who plays Billy Barker. He's the owner of the strip club where Mary ends up working. I don't really have a lot to say about him. I kind of have two feelings about him, where one, I'm like, oh, you and Mary should have really ended up together. There's almost in a really toxic way because there is a codependency there for each of them. But also, what a dickhead getting a blowjob off of one of the strippers. Like, what the fuck was he playing at when he has got Mary? Like, I just don't understand. Maybe he was feeling emasculated and needed to regain some agency or something like that. Take some ownership of the situation because he's the club owner. Like, I think he feels like he should have authority and power. And actually, as we see throughout the film, Mary is the one that has all of the power. She has all of the fame. And maybe he is jealous of her. Maybe he is, like I said, feeling emasculated. And that's why he decides to do what he did. But I both love and hate him. And he should have known better. But the one thing that I did read about him is about his name, actually, Billy Barker. His name is a tribute to Clive Barker, which I thought was really interesting. Actually makes a lot of sense because Clive Barker, we know his films like the Hellraiser franchise and his many, many books that he's written. A lot of those stem from kind of this underground scene of BDSM, and I think there are a lot of elements of that in this film. So there's a very obvious link there as the club owner, as a little nod to Clive Barker. A couple of people who I want to mention who I thought were fantastic and eerie and beautiful in their very own unique way. First of all, Tristan Risk as Beatrice Johnson. She's the stripper who has had herself surgically altered to resemble Betty Boop, which I can completely see. I think I remember watching this for the first time and being like, what the fuck? But actually, like, I I can understand it now. I love her voice in this, the fact that she is so sweet and well spoken, but actually she's got real tenacity at the same time and real power. Um, Tristan Risk actually stated that her voice was inspired by Ellen Green's performance in Little Shop of Horrors, which again on rewatch makes an awful lot of sense. And then we also have Paula Lindbergh as Ruby Real Girl. She's the fashion designer. She wants to become a real human doll, and she goes to Mary for that very, very extreme body modification regarding her nipples and her genitalia. Oh, I really, really feel for her. Like, clearly, there are some unresolved issues with her, which I think is one way of looking at it. But then also on the flip side of that, I kind of think this whole film, again, we'll come on to it, is about bodily autonomy, especially from a woman's perspective. So I can understand, especially when we're introduced to her husband later on, why she wants that ownership over her own body. And I thought Paula did a fantastic job of making this woman come across as really vulnerable and sensitive. We feel really sorry for her. I have a lot of love for Ruby in this film. And then, of course, we have Dr. Alan Grant, played by David Lovgren. This is Mary's deranged, perverted professor at her medical school. And this man deserves everything he fucking got. Like getting his limbs chopped off, getting his mouth sewn up, getting his tongue split. Absolutely everything. You know, being hung up by a hook. He is essentially a torso in a warehouse by the end of this film. He deserves everything. And I'm not just saying that as a woman, you know, this isn't female rage or anything like that, but it's refreshing to see a film, like I'd said, that has rape featured as a part of it, but isn't entirely a film about rape revenge. It's nice to see justice being served. So I feel really sorry for the guy in one respect, because I would not want to be at the hands of Mary Mason, let me tell you that. When we see what she does to him, whew, I would not want to be in that position. So yeah, fuck Alan Grant, he deserved it. And then the last people that I want to mention is actually the Soska sisters, because they make an appearance in this film. They are the demon twins from Berlin. They go to Mary to ask about the surgery to their arm. They are the twins. And I just think it's really sweet that they've decided to give themselves a part in this film. They are definitely pretty demented in this, very sinister. Not sure I would want that procedure done, but to each their own. I'm also not a twin, so I can't relate to that. But I like that addition of them coming to see Mary in the club and asking for that surgery. So the Soska sisters, I've mentioned them a couple of times here. Let's talk about them. Jen and Sylvia Soska. This film started off not massively successful, but has soon become very much a cult classic, as you can tell the fact that I'm talking about it, the fact that I'm wearing a t-shirt, like I mentioned right at the start, the fact that they are coming to a horror convention in the UK. And I read that their parents actually remortgaged their house to raise enough money to finance this film. And both of their parents actually got a cameo in the film. So dad, Marius, mother, Agnes. The dad plays Dr. Janus, who is a professor at the medical school, and their mother, Agnes, plays a female police officer. So I thought that was quite sweet that they both got a cameo. You kind of expect it if you're going to remortgage your house to raise money for the film. You would kind of want your name on the credits somewhere and to get some screen time. But the film was also shot in 15 days, which I think is phenomenal. For a film of, I think this is decent quality film, given that it was shot in just over 2 weeks. A relatively low budget, especially when you consider all of the special effects that are in the film. And there are a lot of special effects. Like the Soska sisters have said that they were directly, heavily influenced by David Cronenberg, specifically his body horror films like Dead Ringers and The Fly. And there are no post-production visual effects. Everything in this film, all of the visual effects are completely practical. Many of Mary's patients are actually portrayed by members of the actual real life body modification community. So what we see is real. Like Tristan Risk as Beatrice and Paula Lindbergh as Ruby, their makeup is practical as well. I read that it took 2 hours each to apply every single day, which is insane. And I think that comes across really well on screen. Catherine Isabel even attended medical school in order to understand and research the role that she was playing, and she learned how to suture a turkey to be able to do that on film. Like we see her practicing on the turkey in the film before, of course, she gets Dr. Grant to be able to practice on. And I just love that there is so much practical effects. Like I'm sure you've heard me talk about, if you've listened to the podcast before, I have such a love for practical effects. I get really annoyed when filmmakers rely way too heavily on digital effects. So it is another reason why this film pleases me so much. One of the biggest reasons why I love this film, though, is some of the themes that we see. I'm going to start off, first of all, by saying that the Soska sisters actually wrote this while they were trying to sell their film Dead Hooker in a Trunk. And they've said that it mirrors some of the experiences that they had in the film industry, meeting sleazy people that seem initially reputable but actually have ulterior motives. And I love that they've drawn from their own experience in order to create American Mary, because we definitely see a lot of feminist themes throughout this film. Like this has been claimed by female lovers of horror like myself as a feminist horror film. It clearly portrays female rage and revenge, and it definitely explores the way in which Mary regains power, but also Ruby Real Girl, like I said, her body autonomy, the fact that she is challenging societal norms that dictate beauty and self-expression. And the same goes for the Soska sisters as the demon twins from Berlin. That certainly isn't a surgery that I would want to undergo. And certainly, like I said, on first watch, I thought, what the hell? Why are they doing this? But actually, who cares? Because if that's what they want to do with their body, then they are perfectly entitled to do so. And there's definitely a critique of misogyny and subjugation, because the film highlights how women are often objectified. There's no coincidence that this film is set in a strip club, and particularly shines a light on women in male dominated fields like medicine, because we see Mary's journey go from struggling medical student to powerful underground surgeon, and it is fueled by her need to reclaim her body and her life. And speaking of which, like I think one of the other themes that we see throughout this film is one of playing God, almost akin to Frankenstein. Like you could almost describe Mary Mason as a modern day Victor Frankenstein. There's this not necessarily creation of man, it's more like destruction of man that we see throughout the film, modification of man, adaptation of man. And the surgical tools that Mary uses can be seen as both tools to heal, but also instruments of revenge, to harm, which really demonstrate Mary's power and control, and again, kind of playing God in this film. And I actually read, we see Mary in this outfit regularly throughout the film, where she's wearing a white shirt, she's got these black gloves, she's got a black apron, and it's meant to visually evoke Ai Sheena in Audition from 1999, which is often cited as the first torture porn film. And it acts as tribute to that, and I just think that's a fantastic link back, especially given the themes that we see throughout the film. We then also have this subversion of expectations. So the body modification industry is, I think, misunderstood. And it's portrayed in this film as being very accepting, being welcoming, being supportive. It recognizes art and the willingness to pay for it. And then we have the traditional medical world, which is depicted as corrupt, it's exploitative, and it's just flipping that societal expectation. And the film demonstrates this through Mary, because she is struggling in the medical world, but then she flourishes in the underground scene. And the film also critiques corruption and exploitation through a character like Dr. Grant, who abuses his position of power. And I think his downfall at Mary's hands serves as a symbolic reversal of traditional power dynamics, which I absolutely love as well. And then the last theme that I want to touch on is Mary's actual transformation throughout the film, because that is huge. Um, and there are various little things that hint at this. So, not just Mary herself, but things like mirrors and reflections. We see an awful lot throughout the film. And it symbolizes Mary's shifting identity because her reflection becomes a metaphor for her transformation. We then see the color red an awful lot. It's frequently used throughout the film, and it can symbolize blood and it can symbolize violence, but it also represents rebirth in film. And we see this at key moments in Mary's journey from trauma right through to empowerment. And then the last thing, which I think is so, so clever, is the film uses the song Ave Maria throughout, which, by the way, literally translates to Hail Mary, which I think is exceptionally an intelligent choice of song. But what makes it even better is it's played 3 times, and each time it's played, it's at an increasing level of skill. So it starts off very amateur, through to intermediate, through to a very professional recording of Ave Maria. And it matches Mary's skill throughout the film. So starting off as this student through to just getting into the underground scene to being this very, very popular underground body modification surgeon. And the song matches her at each of those stages, which I think is probably my favorite detail about this film. And if you haven't guessed by now, all in all, I absolutely love this film. I remember when I was in my teens, before Instagram and stuff like that was a thing, I remember seeing about body modifications on MySpace and some dodgy websites, like Funny Junk, before there were really any real restrictions on the internet. And it terrified me. It disgusted me. I couldn't understand why people were doing these things, like tongue splitting to their body while they were having implants put under their skin. But at the same time, I was completely intrigued and fascinated by it. And I think I then just kind of put that whole scene to the back of my brain and forgot it existed until I watched American Mary a couple of years after it was released. And it just brought all of that flooding back. I was like, oh, of course this exists. And it just resonated with me as well, because as a woman in my 20s at the time of watching the film, I had experienced various different forms of sexual assault and an attempted rape, and I related very hard to Mary's story. Not necessarily being a body modification surgeon, I wouldn't have the first clue, but it more so her rage and her transition and wanting to use that rage to further herself. And I think I also understood at that point in my life her customers wanting bodily autonomy and to subvert typical beauty standards, because I never really felt like, especially at that time, kind of in my mid-20s, I never really felt like I fit the mold of typical beauty standards. And I knew that I was going to have to carve my own way in terms of how I looked. So the film just instantly resonated with me because of that. And I think that this is a fantastically feminist, dark, gritty film, one that I will watch over and over, probably while wearing my Mary Mason t-shirt, like I am doing today. And like I said, I cannot wait to meet the Soska Sisters. I think that's such a great announcement from HorrorCon. If anyone is going to HorrorCon, by the way, do let me know. It'd be great to meet you and say hello. And maybe I'll bump into you in the queue to meet the Soska Sisters. But yeah, that is my snapshot review of American Mary. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please do let me know in the comments for this episode whether it's a film that you enjoy. What are some films that you've watched that are similar to American Mary? Because that I am yet to discover, and I would love to watch more films that are like American Mary, where it features body modification. That I would definitely be interested in. Or feel free to drop me a message on my socials. So I am at Rate Scary on Instagram and on YouTube, and at Scary Zara Mary on Instagram, TikTok, and Letterboxd. And I would love to chat to you there. But I hope you have enjoyed me dipping my toe into the world of American Mary and sharing my thoughts on it. There are obviously still more episodes of torture porn films to come. So please do follow along on my socials to keep up to date with that. But until then, I will see thee with you soon. I'll see thee soon.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
I guess everyone's entitled to one good scare, huh?
I'll be right back.
Game over.
It's all for you.
Beware the moonlights.
An excellent day for an exorcism.
I'm your #1 fan.